representation and research, I have a couple slides on that in a little bit. Research is not just reading. I know that when we get to college, and maybe some of you beforehand, that's what I really learned how to research. I really learned how to read closely, but that's the only thing that I was using to reference initially as research. It is research to do an observational drawing, because if I'm really slowing down and taking the time to look closely at something and identify all the fine details, eventually I'm going to have some questions about, okay, I was looking at that screw and I noticed that, it went round and around and it went down. Is there a reason why it looked like that? Or I was outside looking at the stop sign and I noticed it kind of made a U like this, but when I was looking at another sign, it kind of had a post like this. So why are they so different? It naturally brings out questions about things that we may not have had before. And then representations. I brought a couple examples of representations. I was with a third grade class that did a project on sharks. We went to Lawrence North because the juniors had done a lab on shark dissection. They had some extra baby sharks, and so the third graders got to dissect sharks with these juniors in high school. They had a little lab sheet. They rubbed Vicks vapor rub up their nose because it really smelled badly in there, but they learned from that Lawrence North teacher, they learned from the students, and then they made representations like this surfboard, and it was about shark attacks. But they made mobile on that. And then they made, I know, it was really kind of fascinating. Shark skin feels like sandpaper, and a lot of times they're like really nice shark skin wallets, and so this group made that. And then they also written about their representations, because this is a great representation, but I wouldn't necessarily know why they had done this, and so there was a written piece that went with it. I have other representations in here you're welcome to look at in a little bit. And I spoke to this that a field trip versus a field visit, the students go with a purpose. They are focused on what information their group needs to acquire about their area of interest. And this was a field visit that a fifth grade class took to the Indiana Museum. It's downtown right by the NCAA.
Mm-hmm. State Museum.
It was either Idledorf or the State Museum.
Okay.
And the guide was like, she was trying to walk us through the tour, and she kept going, okay guys, come on, because they kept stopping, and they were dying to get down the information they needed. So she said, after lunch, you guys can go back through, and you can do what you need to do, because it was such a great group. Thank you so much. This was them after lunch, and the teacher who I worked closely with was in a panic because she couldn't find these two kids who were maybe known for not always being on task at school. And she found them sitting together and working on getting information down for their group. She couldn't find them. And she's like, oh my. Every one of the students was on task. Talked about the purpose of observational drawing. And it just, so you know that the word representation, it's something that students are making to show their new knowledge about their project topic. Simple representation, remember simple's at the beginning, it's not a whole lot of extra. But then the representation during phase 2, like this was the body done by some students at Oak Landon, that's showing their knowledge. So they have it, and then their information is listed along the side. He's eating an apple. Looks like Arthur. And then with research, again, model. I can't say it enough. You're going to model summarizing and paraphrasing, questioning, note-taking is huge. I don't know if anyone here went through TOA or has done the thinking maps, but those really helped me a lot when I started talking about note-taking with my students. Studying pictures, looking at diagrams, listening to an expert. Those are all ways to research. When they're listening to an expert, videotape it with your iPad and then play it back later, and then they can take notes on it. Because we know it's a lot harder to take notes and get every single thing down and pay attention to what's going on. This is really too small, so I will share this with Mrs. Harris to share with you if you'd like, but it just shows different ways to research, the importance of it, and the different sources that you can use. And then assessment is really huge because I know, again, we want to make sure that we are spending our time wisely during project time and that we can really show that they've learned something. We want to look at the quality of representation because it's one of the first times that our kids will have been doing it, and the older they are, they might put something together real quick and say, here you go. It's okay to say, just like we would with a math paper, just like I would with some writing, we need it. That's great. It's a great start. But what we need to do is go back and let me show you how we can make it better. But we're not just going to accept anything because we want to make sure we're proud of our work. Your documentation of your project process, the new vocabulary that's coming out of your kids. I know a first grade class that was talking with the expert about the proboscis. Is that what it is? Mm-hmm. And he was like blown away because they were 6 and 7, and that's the part on the butterfly that comes out like a straw. And I beg more about him. The writing about the topic. I know in Writer's Workshop we do have some freedom to make choices about what we're writing about. It will fit within the unit of study a lot of times. Just a deeper understanding of content, and then your kids come out with presentation skills when they're in phase 3. One thing I recommend, I was in 2 different 3rd grade rooms 2 years ago at my school. One teacher prepared his class, and so they had parents in, and they were standing up, and we're going to talk to you about our project, and we're so excited. The other teacher, they practiced for 15 minutes the day before, and it was really apparent that they practiced for 15 minutes the day before. They hadn't been properly prepared on presentation skills, and so what they were saying didn't sound very good, and their audience skills also weren't what they should have been. And they were all capable, but one had just prepared their class better than the other. Summarization of knowledge or culminating event. This is what over at Forest Glen, it was during the Olympics. P.S. The Olympics, not really a great topic, but a lot of teachers really wanted to do it. It's not close to us at all, and they couldn't bring experts in at this time of the year. I think they were on at like 3 in the morning, and so it really wasn't something that was relevant, but it wasn't great for the younger students. But they made it work. This group right here was doing jiu-jitsu down there, and then they had a weightlifting station over there, and they rotated throughout during their culminating event. And then this documentation is from preschool. It's Crystal Harrison's documentation. But it just kind of tells the story of the project. So it was right next door at Winding Ridge. She's no longer, or ELC Winding Ridge. She's no longer there. But it's just, a lot of times it's the students. She scripted the students' work. Around 3rd grade, I started to have my students help me with documentation, and then I would train about 5 or 6 at the beginning of the year, and then I'd have them train some other people on documentation, other students. So by the end of the year, at least half of my class, if not more, could be documenting, and that was one less thing that I had to be managing, because they're really capable of doing it. And right now it can be so digitized, we don't necessarily have to have it in this way. I'm just kind of an overview of the value of project work. Students are able to explore an area that's interesting to them and see that what they are exploring is relevant and in the real world, and that it allows students to show what they've learned in a way that makes sense to them. So they're really internalizing it more. It becomes their work, and they want to talk about it. And then usually the next year they'll want to do a project on it too because they know so much about it. So start talking with your colleagues, because I know we get a lot of kids wanting to repeat a project because they knew so much about it. Sometimes that's okay because they go in a different direction and learn more, but it's all right to not do the same project every single year. Do you have any questions? That was a really quick overview, but any questions right now about project work? Flex with it. I try to get them involved at least 2 days of the week. They need to really be involved every day, but I also know the reality of what we're doing too with data. I also tried to interweave it in the book selection that I would make, though, in guided reading. In 1st and 2nd grade, it's so much easier with the Reading A to Z books that you can find. So then that way they're part of the project conversation. And project doesn't just have to happen at that time of day. I mean, you can be doing, I don't know what type of literacy workstations are happening in 1 and 2 primarily, but you can make it, you can have it come out during other times of day, especially during the, for 3, 4, 5, and 6. Really, it just kind of depends. You want to look at your schedule, but everybody should be a part of it. And I'd gladly sit down. I'd sit down with you because I don't want to make any decisions for them without.
Right.
But yeah, I would say at least twice a week. But I do it during my science time. We're a STEM school, and so we have to do science.
Right.
Even if we didn't want to, we have to.
Right.
So it naturally works in there.
And I know that before there was an explanation that being a performing arts school, that perhaps in grades 5 and 6, the projects might be arts infused, or is that still kind of a...
Representations could be arts infused, for sure. And a lot of times you can make arts come in through. I know, was it here? Did someone do a project on hair?
Yes, that was Christina Gray.
I mean, and that may not sound, but that is an artistic, beautiful
It started
thing.
off as artists, and it morphed into the kids decided that they believed that beauticians were artists, and then they wanted to talk about hair, and then it was great. We've had people do it on musicians, theater stuff, but your representations can be if you're doing something that's more science-based, your representations can be where you pull in the performing arts. You know, whether your kids write a rap about it, or they do a theatrical presentation, or, they do a dance, like, if you're doing something on the life cycle of a butterfly, you can do a whole dance on, just using movement to express how that happens. Kids have written songs, so there's a lot of ways to pull in the performing arts in the representation stage.
And there's also a section in here that kind of talks about different types of representations. A lot of it's mathematical representations, which, again, I think is great, but that goes more with STEM. But there's also, you've got these specialists. I don't have a dance and drama teacher. I don't have an art teacher. I do have.
You don't have an art teacher?
No.
It hurts my heart. But I do have people who can come in and they can help them represent, through their expertise. Might be the animal life, or it might be experimentation. I know Katie can come in and has done a great job with showing just kids how to work with different materials they would do representations with. Like, I think of this as Gore's class, how they were doing the clay representations, and that's not doing it justice. What else?
I was just going to say that I think it's important to have, when you're gathering your documentation in phase 1, to have it visible so the kids can be reminded of what they've already thought about, and they can build on that thought. So if you could devote like a wall or, a space,
A lot of times,
and there are things.
and there's no real, and I'm 4 minutes over your time, so I'm aware of that, so if you need to go. A lot of times, way back when Sylvia Chart came out, she would say, in phase 1, you're having this, this, and this. And so put this here. Put phase 1 and put your student web here and put this here. Well, your student web doesn't really belong outside of your hallway. You take a picture of it. But your student web should be inside your room, because it's a living and breathing thing that as you're learning more things, you're adding more information to it. You also don't have to necessarily say, this is phase 1. You want it to read like a book, so like this is how we started our project. You're going to read from left to right, so you want it to make sense, but you don't have to just chunk it in phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. But make it read like the story that it is.
So I think it's really important to have all your, your parts in your room. So that a lot of times you see them outside. They really don't belong. They're, reminders of what the kids have already kind of figured out, so they can build.
So if you're doing phase 1, keep that inside your room. Maybe once you have transitioned into phase 2, could you then do some type of display out in the hall with phase 1 things, and then continue with, okay.
And I would take a picture of your
Take a
student
picture.
web and take that out. Or at some point, now we have Promethean boards. I might have started my student web like this, but then I would add it, put it on the Promethean board, and print out a little picture of that, put that there, and then as you're learning more words in phase 2, what I had one teacher do was add phase 2 words in a different color. And then I had a teacher, she's Laurel, I really love her. She would do everything we learned in books would be in red, and everything we learned from guest speaker was in green, and everything. You don't have to be that deep, but you can make it that deep if you want it to. It's okay.
I think the point is to have it out there so the kids can see that you're building on.
Any more?
I'm going to pass out those things from the project approach book that you can look at.
And I actually think I'm really sure that somebody not get this video.
Any other questions?
Yeah, this is the same on both sides. I didn't